There were some registrars who were just mean, made you feel stupid, public humiliation was the norm. What do you mean you don't know what? But once upon a time I was extremely resilient, and it was water off a duck's back because, I just thought, well, that's his problem. I'm here to learn, and if he's going to be mean, that's fine. I'll go ask someone else. It wasn't until much later that it really started to get to me, and by much later I really mean nearly 10 years later. See, you can go through... Humans can tolerate a lot, right? Until they can't. There was one occasion where I yelled at a registrar, an equal, which is unheard of because, it's much easier to yell at someone who's a junior over the phone because they've got no way to hold you to account. Like, they can't complain about you to your seniors because if they do, that's, So, bad behaviour is protected because I guess I knew that no one was going to pull me up on it. Isn't that terrible? But that's how it happens because, people are under such intense pressure and there's no way to hold them to account. I was very mindful not to be mean to interns because I remembered what it felt like. And I always would, if they got it completely wrong, I probably would say, okay, hey, I'm just going to stop you there. These are the 5 things I need every time you call. Do you mind going away and calling back in 10 minutes with these 5 things? Thanks very much. See you later. I think I did well until right at the end when I was over the peak myself, completely burnt out and angry. I was mean to everybody. I was behaving in a way that I thought I never would. It was the same as, it was the same as what everyone else was doing. Well, not everybody, but it's just... Someone would ring and you'd be in the middle... I was in the middle of it. Sorry, let's not pretend it wasn't me. I was in the middle of clinic and the intern would ring and, it wasn't fast enough for me. It wasn't concise enough. I was busy. I was trying to do a very important conversation with a patient and I would say, can you at least give me the correct name for God's sake? Look, just call me back in 5 minutes and I'd hang up. Just short. Snappy. Belittling, I think, is the best word for it. And I knew where it had come from. I had been belittled by a lot of people throughout my training. And so you pick up those behaviours. I couldn't figure out how to get out. I couldn't figure out how to make it stop. I couldn't figure out how to make the pressure go away. And quitting wasn't an option. It's funny to think that quitting would be less of an option than jumping off a cliff. But at the time, I couldn't let it go. I couldn't give up on everything that I had done. I couldn't face the failure. I couldn't face having given up all those years and hours and blood, sweat and tears to then quit. I couldn't quit, but I also couldn't do it anymore. And so I just, and I was single and having an existential crisis. And so it's funny because I could go to work every morning and function normally and look fine and be fine and put up a really good wall. But then I'd get home and I couldn't even pay my bills. I couldn't shop, I couldn't buy food, I couldn't cook. Just because I couldn't. I was paralysed to do anything except get up, go to work hard, and come home. Oh, I wasn't worried about getting reported. That wasn't the barrier to care for me. Now, the barrier to care for me was that I didn't think that they could help me. I mean, what could they do to change my circumstance? You know, they couldn't get me out of this hole that I was in. They couldn't stop the freight train that I was on. No one could change my circumstance, so what was the point in asking for help? It wasn't until about 2.5 years later, when I actually got help, that I realised that had I had help 3 years earlier, this could all have been avoided. I didn't realise that help would work.
I think I've enjoyed a lot of things in medicine. I think I enjoy going to work. Like today, I had a great day at work. Today I felt like I was applying what I'd learnt to help people, and I was learning as well at the same time. I mean, consultants were teaching me, and I was teaching junior staff. It was a reasonable day. I've had some hard days as well, but I don't know, I think an ideal day is I feel, I've always looked forward to going to work. Yeah. I'm enjoying what I'm doing now, and I guess you know it when you've done something worthwhile. This morning we're having this meeting, and the palliative care consultant said, my registrar had an accident today. She totaled her car on the M5. Now, she was on call last night. She was taking calls every hour. And I was just livid. I mean, this has happened way too many times. I mean, the number of stories you hear about surgical residents. I mean, I myself had an accident coming home.
Oh, you had an accident, didn't you? You was coming home from a night shift?
Yeah.
Yeah. You should tell me about that one.
Yeah, well, I had this accident, and
yeah, actually, I had an accident, and that was coming home from a night shift, and yeah, I didn't anticipate that. That was a micro sleep. I'm lucky I survived that, but yeah, you do everything you can do to avoid that. But yeah, your one was funny too, though, because I think that highlights something else.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, I was in the I was in the first year of my basic physician training, and I'd done a night shift. I lived about 40 minutes from work, and I did that commute every day. And I drove home, and I was driving home, and I'd had a coffee, whatever. I mean, you try and do what you can, and I fell. Well, I was starting to fall asleep, and I was swerving, and I was about 200 metres from my house, and I fell asleep. And the car swerved, hit another car. I mean, what if someone was in that car? I mean, what if I hurt someone? Like, your blood alcohol level is like 0.4 at that stage. You just cannot think straight.
Well, you're saying it's the same as a blood alcohol level of 0.4. You weren't also drinking?
No, I wasn't.
No, just to clarify.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you understood that. But look, just on the topic of car accidents, I mean, you hadn't actually had another car accident last year, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, remember, that wasn't so much your fault. That was coming... Yeah, you were coming home from, you were going to work that time.
Yeah.
And he had a 3-car accident. After something like that, I mean, what did he do? Well, we drove into work. He didn't take the day off. He came into work, He said, look, I have to go to work. I have to see the patients. I have to do the round of patients. I have to impress the bosses. I mean, I have to. There's too much happening. They can't survive without me.
I mean,
Then you came in, yeah.
Yeah. So who will see the
Yeah,
patients?
who'll see them?
I mean, who'll round them?
Yeah, I know. And then you come in and it's like, that's very common. I mean, the amount of times that we've been sick and we've just come into work anyway because we feel we have no choice.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in my intern year now and I've been saved so many times by the nurses. So there was this one time I was sitting in the cafe and I get a call. It's one of the nurses and she says, "Did you mean to prescribe 1.5 milligrams?" And I was like, "No." So that's essentially a homeopathic dose. Like, that's not going to do anything. So, she actually came down with the medication form and got me to change it. It was very sweet. They're like, "Oh, did you mean to prescribe this?" Or, "Did you know your patient's respiratory rate is 30 and you should probably be there right now?" Yeah. So, yeah. So I could tell you that I've had depression for a long time. And this year I was actually having moments where I was having suicidal ideation. I actually got quite close a few times. You're aware of the law or the rule around mandatory reporting of mental illness. So I can tell you unequivocally now that the fear of mandatory reporting meant that I did not tell my doctor. Yeah, I didn't tell my supervisor. I didn't call Lifeline. I didn't do any of that. I didn't tell my psychologist because I could be reported or I would lose my job for having those thoughts. I also, like, the worry of that I might be put away somewhere and then lose my job. I mean, I'd appreciate it if you'd obviously anonymise that. I mean, you can say it, but just don't relate it to me in any way. Yeah, I guess the pressure does bring out the worst in people, but it's the culture that allows it to happen. It's usually things like, I mean, it is personal experiences, but it will be things like, what are you doing? Or, oh yeah, don't worry, you're no more pathetic than your predecessors. Yeah, one of the classic lines I would get was woman. That was from obviously male seniors. I mean, women to women in the operating room, I haven't had that experience. It was always from male seniors saying things like, "Yeah, woman, and what are you doing?" I mean, the patient can hear everything. You know, they're right there. I've had patients come up to me afterwards and say things like, "Are you all right?" Or, "I can't believe he's just treated you that way." Yeah, sometimes it makes you sort of doubt your abilities, even though, Actually, I've had a patient ask me, "Am I the first person you're operating on?" It's just that humiliating, even though they're the 100th that you've done that procedure. But because there's just so much noise being made in that operating room, they just have no faith or confidence in you. Look, I've personally always experienced it in front of other people, including nurses, including other doctors. They'll come up to you afterwards and say, "You all right?" They won't step in and say, "Hey, what's going on here? Don't treat her that way." Everyone just shuts up, puts up. The
patient came in who'd come off his pushback. He'd had an accident and he was complaining of hip pain. So straight away, until proven otherwise, I'm suspicious of, well, I want to make sure that he hasn't fractured hips. Because if you then try and log roll them and you move that unstable fracture, they can hemorrhage. So it's a fairly simple test. So this doctor, I had to say, "Oh, look, just before we log roll, would you mind if we just checked him? He's complaining of hip pain." So I did try the whole graded escalation. And in the end, I had to say, look, please don't log roll until we've checked him. He's got a pelvic binder from the ambulance service. He's complaining of hip pain. Can we please check him before we roll him? And in the middle of this whole room, this doctor just screamed at me, yelled at me, called me all kinds of names in front of my nursing colleagues and his colleagues. Interestingly, his boss was watching from another resus bay, and I saw her pull him aside. I don't know what she said, but he didn't tell me. But then she came and said to me, look, you did the right thing, even though you got screamed at. And I thought, oh, yeah, I mean, that's fine to tell me that now, after you've been screamed and yelled at across a room in a situation that's high-pressured. I mean, for her to quietly behind the scenes say, I think you did the right thing, well, that's nice, and I appreciated that she did that, but did you say that to the doctor? Did you say that to any of the other 6 people in the room watching? The ambos out the back watching? Anyone? I mean, the patient in the other bays? And you just think, oh, that's a bit unfair. I mean, at the end of the day, I honestly think there are some fundamental things that cannot be avoided. And money is really the kicker. At one point, it was that if you don't meet certain benchmarks, you'd lose your funding. So having money tied to
benchmarks such as
the 4-hour rule. Yes, the 4-hour rule. So someone who comes in has to be seen and admitted,
or triaged,
or discharged within 4 hours. A clinical decision has to be made within 4 hours
to reduce waiting times in hospital emergency departments.
Yes.
But doesn't that just mean that people end up in beds in hall corridors, or
worse still, they get sent home when they shouldn't be sent home, because we're going to weigh this up and decide, are they clinically at risk or not? If they're low clinical risk, there's no beds, send them home.
So are you describing to me an audit culture which allows a Minister for Health to stand up and say something impressive in Parliament about how we've managed to get hospital waiting times down? Or?
Yes.
Okay, so
yes.
When the Minister stands up in Parliament and says, we've managed to get hospital waiting times down by X, well, what's the cost in terms of patient care?
Well, I think it's that the patients don't get care. They might physically get their blood test done. They might physically get their x-ray. They might physically get their script for their antibiotics. But if you really look at it, I mean, if you honestly view human beings, and this, when I first did my training, was a huge component of our education. A human being is made up of the biological, the psychological, the social, and the spiritual. All. A human being is all of these components rolled into one. I do vividly remember a patient one day who was quite distressed. I mean, not in an open, wailing, gnashing of teeth kind of way, but when you look closely at that person, you could see that they were very distressed. They weren't the one pushing the buzzer or anything. There was nothing to draw my attention to her, but when you look closely, I could see that she was crying, silently crying. And so I went over and chatted to her. Anyway, what it boiled down to was she was genuinely scared that she was going to die. I mean, she wasn't going to, but that's not the point. She was genuinely scared that she was going to, and that this was going to happen before her minister could come in to visit her. So you see, things like that, I think, the cost of focusing on money and numbers and, less waiting times, I mean, they're the stories you hear about. This friend of mine, first known I was an intern, and he's doing the after hours, see. Anyway, he gets asked by the ward to go around there and certify someone as dead. So basically he goes around there and he's feeling very nervous about getting it right. And he's worried shitless that he's going to make a mistake because he's never seen a dead body before and so on. So anyway, what he does, he actually takes this mirror that was on the wall and he puts it straight over the patient's face. And he starts looking for a fog mark on the mirror to see whether the patient's still breathing. And when there's no fog mark on the mirror, he's happy to certify the patient deceased. And the ward staff come in to find this guy holding the mirror over the patient's face. He became a very good doctor. He became a very good doctor. But well, look, I don't think I've... well, look, I was never trained to certify someone as dead. I just always felt a bit more confident about... well, I didn't need a mirror, if you know what I mean.
I think people can still be very confused about what a nurse's role is. Medical staff are very confused about what a nurse's role is. I think many of them don't appreciate we actually have a different role to them. I see my job as helping patients, not necessarily helping doctors. We're there to work as a team, but predominantly my focus is on what helps the patient. It's about human experiences. It's about helping people with the experience of being ill. That's your job. Well, I can't tell you how, seriously. I can't ever think of the job that would give you the feeling of satisfaction that you get when it goes right. I can't tell you how good that is, which sounds a bit over the top, but it's true. Seriously, like you can go on a shift, not be feeling 100%, bit of a meh day. You can finish that shift in great mood, best mood, because you know you've done a good job and you know people appreciate what you've done for them and you've worked with a great bunch of colleagues. Nurses have the best sense of humour. We talk about the maddest things over lunch and we always have a laugh because life can be pretty grim when you work in a hospital. It's a fantastic career and I've loved every minute of it, even the bad stuff.
That's gorgeous.
I did a cardiology term. This was, I think I've been a doctor a whole 3 months by this stage. There were 2 interns, 2 of us, the other one was male. There were these Friday meetings where the cardiothoracic surgeon and the cardiologist would meet in a very small dark room and I'd be the one who'd have to I'd do like a little presentation and then I'd show the videos of the angiograms. Of course, the lights went out. The first time it happened, I thought, that surgeon's standing awfully close. I thought I'll just move a little bit this way. The lights go out the next time and he's standing really close and getting closer. I didn't know how to handle it. He was a very senior surgeon, very respected at the hospital. So basically I just kept moving away. The next movie was coming up and I spoke to the other intern. I feel really uncomfortable with this guy. So the other intern, he came and stood. He always put himself between me and the surgeon, which was great, so that solved the problem. But there were no consequences for the surgeon. One of the most traumatic experiences of my life occurred at a country hospital on an Easter. I was in my first term, or my second term of being my second year, so I'd been a doctor for 13 months. This hospital, being on the highway, every now and again has massive, horrible accidents. They had a massive, horrible accident, and I was the doctor for the hospital. Even now when I think about it, I think I want to cry. I mean, I saw people die who shouldn't have died because I didn't have the skills or the... It was a nightmare. I had... I mean, the one that still makes me tearing up straight away. A little 2-year-old came in, still in the car seat with an obvious fractured head. And then his parents came in who'd had the tops of their... Sorry, this is gross if you're not medical. I went, what's that cloth there for? Oh, his brain, right, put that back. It was like, it was like being in a war zone. One of them had a hole in their lung and the lung was basically compressed so they couldn't breathe. And I went, well, I've seen someone put a tube in a lung, so I'd better do that. So, I'm off and doing, and you're thinking, where is everybody? I, of course, was drowning in blood. It was 36 hours before I stopped. And I did get air ambulances and I sent people. I think looking back, I did the best I possibly could, but it's a little country town. I was a junior doctor and I saw children die in front of me. Maybe they would have died anyway, but I felt, of course, responsible. In the middle of all this, there were some funny stories, well, sort of funny when you're medical. A man arrives at the hospital thinking he's Jesus. So in the middle of all this, I'm trying to get the ambulance and the police to send him to schedule him, because clearly he needed to be scheduled. I mean, he was funny, because he really did think he was Jesus. He was walking around amongst all this bedlam blessing people. Anyway, he went off in the police car. Right, so he's gone. And then I got an ambulance and an air ambulance to the children's hospital. It was like, ugh. 36 hours later, I finally get round to the truck driver who caused all this, who'd had a fracture. And he was, well, he started hitting on me and I'm thinking, you are a pig. You've killed people and now you're trying to crack on to the doctor. This is so inappropriate. Anyway, this is not a medical story in the sense because maybe he was in shock, maybe. Whatever. But that's not the point of the story. The other doctor, there's two of you, she'd gone home for the weekend and then decided this hospital was all too hard and wasn't coming back. So I think I started on the Thursday and worked all the way through. So amongst all this, I got no relief at all. Anyway, the whole thing was one of the worst experiences of my life. So on Tuesday, medical admin opens up again, and by this time I'm thinking, where is the other doctor? I'm ringing them and they go, oh, she's not coming back. And I said to them, I've got to tell you, I'm dangerous. I am traumatised beyond belief. Patients are at risk. I haven't slept. I haven't eaten. I'm just not functioning. And you need to do something for the sake of the patients, not necessarily me. And do you know what they said? It'll put hairs on your chest. And I replied, I don't actually want hairs on my chest. I got no support from that at all. So the point of the story is when you come back in next year to apply for your job, you come in for an interview, which is usually a nothingy kind of interview unless you want to go into one of the specialist training schemes. I didn't. Just wanted to do another general year because I felt I could get more experience doing general things. You walk into that room, this very long, intimidating table with 5 very high-level doctors at the end of the table. You're a little bit anxious when you're walking through that door. Before I even got to the table where the chair was, one of them said to me, oh, you're that whinger from the country hospital. And I said, absolutely. Are you aware of what happened to me when I was there? That was the final straw for me. I can't work in this system. I can't stay in a system that cares so little. How can you say that I'm the whinger when I rang you and I said I'm dangerous and your patients that you are responsible for need care and nothing happened? I can't stay in this system.
I remember the first, this is just the first baby I ever delivered just shot out. I had to catch it in slips. It wasn't just easing out, it went whoosh. I mean, I got it before it hit the ground, but that was just being prepared to be able to react. I think a lot of people would be horrified to see someone opened up. But when you're doing it, I know personally, and I think for others, it's a feeling of, well, how would you describe it? You're not dealing with a mess. You're dealing with something that's important and good. But it's not horrifying. It's quite normal.